In 2015, researchers at Stanford University conducted an experiment that produced results they did not fully expect. They took two groups of adults. One group walked for 90 minutes through a natural environment of trees and grassland. The other walked for the same duration through a busy urban environment. Before and after the walks, both groups underwent neuroimaging using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, to measure activity in a specific brain region called the subgenual prefrontal cortex. This region is particularly active during a specific type of thinking, repetitive negative self-referential thought, the kind of thinking that cycles through problems, regrets, and anxieties without resolution, what psychologists call rumination, and what neuroscientists have linked to the default mode network, the brain's background system that activates when you aren't focused on a task. The urban walkers showed no significant change in subgenual prefrontal cortex activity after their walk. The nature walkers showed a dramatic reduction. The brain region associated with rumination was measurably quieter after 90 minutes in nature. But the research went further. The nature walkers also showed lower salivary cortisol levels, lower heart rate, and higher HRV. And in subsequent research, measurably better performance on working memory and attentional control tasks. A 90-minute walk in nature produced brain changes that a 90-minute urban walk, at equivalent intensity, could not produce. The natural environment itself was doing something specific to the brain that the urban environment was not. Subsequent research from Michigan, Finland, and Japanese studies of Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has continued to build the picture. Nature exposure produces specific, measurable, neurologically meaningful effects on the aging brain. Effects that reduce the cognitive decline drivers we've been addressing throughout this series. Effects accessible to virtually every person, because the minimum effective dose for benefit is far lower than most people assume. By the end of this video, you will understand the neuroscience of nature precisely, and you will have a specific dose-calibrated nature protocol that you can begin implementing this week. To understand why nature has such specific and powerful effects on the aging brain, we need to understand the default mode network, the DMN. Its dysregulation after 50 is one of the most underappreciated drivers of cognitive decline. The DMN is a set of brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, that activate together during specific mental activity. When your attention is not directed towards something in the environment, the DMN activates. It is the brain's background processing mode. It runs when you are daydreaming, remembering the past, imagining the future, or engaged in self-referential thought. In young, healthy brains, the DMN and the task-positive networks, the ones used for focus, exist in a dynamic balance. When one activates, the other suppresses. This anti-correlation is healthy and efficient, allowing the brain to shift flexibly between tasks. After 50, this dynamic balance deteriorates. First, the DMN becomes hyperactive at baseline, running louder than it should. This consumes neural resources that could otherwise support focused attention, working memory, and executive function. Research using fMRI has documented higher resting state DMN activity in adults over 50, associated with greater mental fatigue. Second, the anti-correlation weakens. When you try to focus, the DMN background noise continues running. This is the neural basis of the distractibility and inability to maintain focus that many adults over 50 experience. Third, the DMN becomes dominated by rumination, repetitive negative self-referential thought like worry, regret, and anxious self-appraisal. Chronic rumination elevates cortisol and activates the sympathetic nervous system, reducing vagal tone. It impairs sleep through racing thoughts at bedtime and consumes the neural energy needed for memory and learning. Nature exposure produces the specific condition that allows DMN hyperactivation to reduce. The brain in nature is in a third state, soft fascination, where involuntary attention is gently engaged by environmental stimuli. The DMN is active, but not ruminative, and the prefrontal cortex can finally disengage from effortful control. This restoration of the brain's regulatory balance is the primary mechanism through which nature produces its cognitive benefits. Beyond the DMN regulation mechanism, nature exposure produces several additional biological effects directly relevant to the cognitive aging mechanisms we've addressed. The first is cortisol and stress hormone reduction. Research has documented significant reductions in salivary cortisol following nature exposure. The magnitude of reduction depends on duration, the specific natural environment, and individual characteristics. A meta-analysis found that forest environments specifically produced significantly greater cortisol reductions than other outdoor environments and dramatically greater than urban settings. Specific characteristics, the phytoncides, green visual complexity, and the natural sound spectrum contribute to this reduction beyond just being outdoors. The cortisol reduction from nature exposure is directly relevant to the ashwagandha protocol. Both reduce cortisol through different mechanisms. Ashwagandha works through the HPA axis pharmacologically. Nature works through the attentional and sensory nervous system neurologically. Together, they produce greater cortisol reduction than either achieves alone. The second mechanism involves phytoncides, the volatile organic compounds released by trees and plants into forest air. Phytoncides are responsible for the smell of forests, particularly aromatic compounds released by conifers, deciduous trees, and plants. Research from Japanese scientists studying Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has documented biological effects that go beyond general nature exposure. Forest bathing significantly increased natural killer cell activity and count. These immune cells are vital for cancer surveillance and senescent cell clearance. The NK cell increases from forest bathing persisted for up to 30 days after the exposure in some studies. Phytoncide inhalation in hotel rooms, using a diffuser with hinoki cypress oil, produced NK cell increases comparable to forest bathing itself. This suggests that the phytoncide component can be partially replicated in urban settings through essential oil diffusion. The specific compounds associated with benefits are alpha-pinene and beta-pinene, found in conifers, and D-limonene, found in citrus trees. The third mechanism is the visual and acoustic properties, specifically their fractal nature, and the specific frequency spectrum of natural sounds. Natural environments produce spatial frequency patterns that match the sensitivity of the visual cortex, producing lower physiological stress responses. Natural sounds, birdsong, water movement, wind through leaves, activate the parasympathetic nervous system more effectively than silence or urban noise. Research found significant vagal tone increases during exposure to recorded nature sounds, even without any physical presence in a natural environment. The fourth mechanism is awe, the emotion produced by vast natural landscapes, ancient forests, and dramatic geological features. Awe experiences produce specific neurobiological effects, including significant reductions in pro-inflammatory cytokine levels. This also increases the sense of connection and meaning that counters the loneliness-driven biological harms addressed in previous videos. A study found that weekly experiences of awe produced the lowest levels of inflammatory cytokines of any of the positive emotions studied. The specific anti-inflammatory effect of awe may reflect its combination of cortisol reduction and vagal tone activation. Now let's address the most practically important question for adults who want to implement nature exposure as a brain health intervention. How much is enough? The research on nature dose and cognitive benefit has produced increasingly specific answers, and the answers are more accessible than most people assume. The most cited research comes from a study of over 19,000 adults. They found that spending at least 120 minutes per week in natural environments, spending time in parks, forests, or coastlines, reported significantly better health and well-being than those who spent no time in nature. Below 120 minutes per week, benefits were not consistently detected. At 120 minutes and above, benefits were consistent and meaningful. 120 minutes per week. This is approximately 17 minutes per day, or 2 60-minute nature exposures per week. Alternatively, one longer weekend nature session can be supplemented by shorter daily exposures. This 120-minute threshold functions as a minimum effective dose. Above it, additional exposure produces additional benefits, with more time in nature generally associated with better outcomes. For cognitive outcomes, research suggests even shorter single exposures produce significant acute benefits. Some studies found restoration from just 20 minutes in a park. These effects persist for 20 to 30 minutes after returning to an indoor environment, restoring directed attentional capacity in the subsequent hour. The dose-response relationship follows a curve, with the greatest per-minute benefit coming from the first 20 to 30 minutes of nature exposure. Frequent shorter exposures produce more total brain benefit than one long session. Frequency matters as much as duration. For phytoncide exposure, coniferous forests with pine, spruce, and fir trees produce the highest concentrations and the strongest immune effects. If your local options include coniferous forests, prioritize them. For urban adults, water features like fountains and rivers also produce restoration. These blue spaces produce cognitive restoration effects comparable to green space. Even living plants indoors in workspaces produce measurable attention restoration. Window views of trees and natural landscapes have been shown to reduce cortisol and improve cognitive performance compared to urban views. This remains true even for adults who cannot physically access outdoor nature spaces. Start with your 120 minutes this week. The Nature Protocol has 3 tiers, each providing increasing cognitive benefit with increasing nature access. It is designed so that every adult over 50 can implement at least the first tier regardless of where they live. Tier 1 is the Urban Minimum Protocol, accessible to virtually everyone. Achieve the 120-minute weekly threshold through natural elements in your environment. The research does not require wilderness. It requires meaningful exposure to natural elements. Park walks are ideal, as most urban areas have parks nearby. A 20-minute park walk provides exercise and nature exposure, capturing BDNF benefits, cardiovascular health, and DMN restoration, while reducing cortisol simultaneously. 3 40-minute park walks per week achieves the 120-minute threshold. If a river, lake, pond, or fountain is accessible, prioritize water exposure. Even brief water exposure during existing commutes accumulates meaningful blue space benefit. For urban environments, consider phytoncide supplementation. A diffuser with alpha-pinene and beta-pinene essential oils like Siberian fir or Hinoki cypress approximates the phytoncide concentrations of a forest. Japanese Shinrin-yoku studies suggest this indoor exposure produces measurable NK cell and stress marker benefits at a very low monthly cost. Nature sounds during work also document vagal tone and attention restoration benefits. Use birdsong or water sounds at low volume during cognitive work. Tier 2 is the Weekly Green Protocol. Add 1 weekly nature session of 60 to 90 minutes in the most natural environment accessible. This session provides DMN restoration, phytoncide exposure, and extended parasympathetic activation that shorter daily exposures cannot fully replicate. Morning timing maximizes benefit, combining nature with bright light for circadian anchoring, producing the greatest cortisol reduction and vagal tone increase. Practice mindful nature immersion. Do not listen to podcasts or check your phone. Fully attend to the sensory environment around you. Tier 3 is the Immersive Nature Protocol. Research on forest bathing indicates that immersion of 2 to 4 hours produces long-lasting immune effects. This protocol is not hiking. It is slow, sensory, and deliberately unhurried. Stop frequently and attend to the sounds, smells, and visual complexity. Breathing deeply maximizes phytoncide inhalation. The therapeutic benefit comes from sensory engagement, rather than physical exertion or distance covered. Nutritional additions amplify these benefits. Cortisol reduction from nature synergizes with ashwagandha, and vagal tone increases synergize with specialized breathing techniques. Redirect your existing walking routine through a park or tree-lined path. This adds nature exposure to your habit, with 0 additional time investment. 33 videos. And with nature, we have revealed a brain health intervention that is simultaneously the most ancient and the most overlooked in the entire series. Every intervention we've discussed has been built from laboratory research, molecules, mechanisms, clinical trials. The nature research connects us to something older and more fundamental. The evolutionary reality is that the human brain developed in natural environments over millions of years. Its optimal function may require inputs no supplement can fully replicate. Nature and the DMN. The rumination reduction that nature produces directly addresses the chronic negative thinking that elevates cortisol and impairs sleep onset. Nature sounds produce vagal tone, increases through the acoustic parasympathetic pathway. Nature exposure is a multi-pathway intervention that complements breathing and cold water practices. Physical activity in natural environments produces BDNF. The awe experiences that natural environments produce may directly stimulate BDNF through novelty and exploration circuits. Nature and neuroinflammation. The cortisol reduction from nature reduces HPA axis-driven inflammatory activation, while phytoncide-driven NK cell increase improves the immune clearance of senescent cells. Research found nature experiences shared with others produce stronger oxytocin responses. Shared walks in natural environments are one of the most potent brain health interventions. Nature and sleep. Research documents significant sleep improvements through circadian light anchoring from natural daylight and cortisol reduction that create the physiological conditions for optimal sleep. Regular nature exposure is associated with measurably slower epigenetic aging, likely through cortisol and inflammation reduction, that together slow the biological stressors driving epigenetic drift. Identify the most natural environment within 15 minutes of your home. Plan 3 visits this week, each at least 20 minutes. Leave your earphones at home. Order a diffuser and Siberian fir or Hinoki cypress essential oil for indoor phytoncide exposure if your local nature access is limited. Run it for 1 to 2 hours daily. Coming up next week, we explore the specific cognitive benefits of learning new skills after 50. Engaging in novel, effortful learning produces BDNF increases and cognitive reserve expansion. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs a nature prescription. Stay sharp, stay wild, stay vital. I will see you next week.